Welcome into another edition of the Raise the Flags reaction show. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith, and we are continuing to move through that documentary, as I'm sure a lot of you have already done, are in the process of doing. We are here to react to and dive even deeper into each of those episodes because there's just so much there.
Yeah, you know how the last time we were talking, we mentioned that you watched them all, you kind of binged them all,
yeah.
And I was waiting to watch them before each of these, so it'd be fresh in my mind. I couldn't stick to it, Casey.
You binged?
Yeah, I binged them at one point, and so yesterday I went back and watched them all again.
Oh, I get you. So you binged and then you binged again. I love it. I've
seen them all twice.
I love it. I'm here for it. And so, yeah, again, today we are going to be talking about episodes 5 and 6 from the documentary. So if you have not watched those yet, go watch those first and then come back here because spoilers abound.
Massive spoiler.
Massive.
Alert.
Although, again,
huge. Not
necessarily about the Bucs history because a lot of people already know it.
Well,
but
not
some
like
of
this.
Not like this. That is very true. So let's just kind of dive into our thoughts here. And of course, this episodes 5 and 6 are really sort of just the Gruden era is sort of the way that I would look at the timeline of what is covered in these couple episodes here. And so we started with the coaching search. And the Bill Parcells thing is so interesting to me. Like I'd heard a bit about how he'd sort of jilted the Bucs a couple times, left us at the altar a little bit. So that was very interesting.
Well, can you believe their first in-person meeting with him was at a Denny's?
I love it.
See, that's the kind of thing I didn't know. And Bill bonked his head on the chandelier or lamp or whatever you call it. So I didn't know that stuff. And really, this episode is about Gruden mostly, but it starts with the fact that we needed a coach because they made the tough decision to fire Tony. I know it wasn't easy, and I know how the players felt about it, but you look back at that now and think about this happening in this day and age. Tony did a press conference after he was fired. He was willing to go ahead and speak to the media after being fired. That's
almost unheard of.
I mean, that's kind of Tony.
It's pretty, it's pretty incredible. So then, I loved what you said about the Denny's. I love all these little sort of human moments like that, of where we just hear the headlines of met with Parcells, and then you hear these things, and it's like, I love the awkwardness.
These are people that could buy a lot at Denny's too. I mean, what's the most expensive thing on the Denny's menu?
That's
is what
so
I'm wondering.
True. That's what I would spend my money on is a whole bunch of pancakes. That's exactly it. So then I also thought then you get into all of the sort of rumors, the speculation, and
I remember all that.
It was really interesting for me to hear, especially the idea of leaks happening and then that affecting kind of who was leading the charge.
And this was before like all the social media and Twitter and everybody going out and putting their own information out there. So you heard things, but they became part of the lore, but you didn't actually hear them confirmed. And what I thought about this part of this episode was people were saying the quiet stuff out loud. Like I thought back then that the story was Rich McKay really wanted Marvin Lewis, and that the owners didn't want to go from Tony Dungy to Marvin Lewis because it was kind of similar,
felt too similar. Yeah.
And so the Glazers kind of took over the search, and all this was kind of out there, but it wasn't really talked about.
Yeah.
And now you have the people that were involved saying, "Yeah, that's exactly what happened," and that this was the beginning of sort of the fracture of the relationship between the Glazers and Rich McKay.
Yeah,
and they said that we don't have to speculate.
And I that was something I loved about the whole documentary was, to your point, sort of just the honesty and openness of the things that, like you said, we'd speculated about, and now getting to hear,
they're
confirmed.
saying the quiet parts out loud.
Yeah, and then I also thought it was interesting the part about looking at how they said they looked at Nick Saban, but that the money would be so much that at that point, like, you might as well go for John Gruden.
Yeah, exactly.
Of like, if you're going to pay this amount of money, you might as well go with someone that's already proven they can do it, kind of in the NFL level.
Yeah, and Nick Saban really, I mean, I know he was with the Dolphins for a bit, I believe, but didn't last very long. Not to say he couldn't have done it in the NFL, but it didn't really happen.
Yeah, so, you had the more proven quantity in John Gruden. And, I loved this whole part. And this was one of the clips shown at the premiere event was, the whole thing about this middle of the night John Gruden negotiations. And I'm like, I feel like we're listening to a Mission Impossible movie. Like behind all of it, there should have been this like ticking clock and like dun dun. And the whole like
24.
Exactly. That's what we needed was the 24 hours of the Gruden negotiations. And just the fact that it all came down to figuring out how to use a fax machine in the middle of the night. Yeah, that Gruden had to thank his wife for figuring all of this out. And I just loved the masterful negotiations and all of this.
Well, they were under the gun. That was the part. They're like, they wanted it in the morning before stuff got out that they weren't going to hire. And I'll tell you what, at one point, I think it was maybe Ed Glazer who said, and everybody thought we were hiring Steve Mariucci, and we weren't going to hire Steve Mariucci. I can confirm that because that included me.
That you thought they were going for it?
There was the day that we announced Coach Gruden's hiring. That was, by the way, nobody knew that was coming. I mean, this really was stealth. And Ed Glazer called me because I was running the website at that point, and he said, "We're hiring a coach. Who do you think it is?" Like, just put me on the spot, and I'm like, Steve Mariucci?
Yeah.
And he goes, no. And then he told me who it was. And I'm like, wow.
I bet that was exactly the answer he wanted to. That I bet he just went, yes, we did it. We even fooled the people in our building that we wanted Steve Mariucci.
Yep.
That's pretty great.
Another thing that I thought was cool, that I think it was Joe Glazer made the this is a bit of a spoiler alert for later, but he makes the connection about the tuck rule game. Mm-hmm. And you think about that tuck rule game, and I'm sure everybody knows what we're talking about, so I'm not going to go through it, but it's incredible that both Brady and Gruden ended up winning Super Bowls for the Buccaneers.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And it was all, probably none of it would have ever happened if not for the tuck rule.
That's something I love about the NFL are the ripple effects.
Yeah.
The one play, the one
it's amazing.
Moment, the one ref call, the one whatever it is that can change the entire trajectory of a franchise.
Yeah, we just saw this in the last few days with head coaches getting fired.
It's so
interesting.
interesting.
Does John Harbaugh get fired if the kicker makes the field goal?
Who knows? Yeah, it's so interesting. So, all right, now also we get to now they have Gruden. He's in. And, man, I just thought the fact he didn't get to bring anybody.
I know.
That he doesn't see this coming. He's traded in the middle of the night, and now he doesn't get to bring anybody. And I can't imagine the whirlwind and the stress of that, of like you're having to start from scratch.
Yeah. I mean, the good news for him was he kind of could just keep our entire defensive staff.
Yeah.
Which is what happened.
Wasn't doing too bad. Which is very interesting. And I am so unsurprised by just everything, the description of how he came in and how he decided to approach it. The least surprising things in the whole documentary to me, where he was just like challenged the defense, right? Like, even though he got brought in to sort of deal with the offense, he wasn't just leaving the defense to their own devices.
And it's obvious that it worked, right? We know in hindsight that it worked. But it's not an easy line to walk, I think, for a new head coach. And I think you can contrast that, and we'll see it later in another episode, with Greg Schiano coming in and trying to kind of do the hard-ass approach. Mm-hmm. And one of them was wildly successful at the way he implemented it, and the other one wasn't. And
I feel like psychologists could do studies on studies of what that difference is in the line is.
I think what Gruden did was he made it clear that he respected all those defensive players, but also, I want to beat your ass.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean, he declared war, as they said, on the defense.
It was about a competition.
Yeah.
More than just being hard on someone for the sake of it, or belittling them or anything.
They knew he knew how good they were.
Yeah. That's true, because I do think that that's a common thing I hear a lot of times about the whole NFL, even versus like college or other levels. It's like, they're like, we're grown men. Like, you don't need to just yell at me.
Right. But if you challenge me,
and
there's a different story.
There's that subtle difference there, which I thought was interesting, the way that Gruden handled that.
Yeah,
and
I thought the whole bootleg on the first play of the run session,
hilarious.
That whole segment with the reactions, everybody, was one of the best parts of the whole docuseries.
I agree. And I love how it felt so raw still to the guys. Like, the way they talked about it, especially like Warren looked like he was ready to go tackle someone.
He was not happy
in that moment. Like, you could see him go back to that moment of like, oh, this is how it's going to be. Okay.
And even like Brooks and Barber, their facial expressions, like, really?
Like,
and that's just that's them reacting to it, what, 25 years later?
Yeah, it's incredible. I think one of my favorite parts was the fact that Brad Johnson can still rep out those play calls. Killed me. It absolutely killed me, because I'm like, to me, I felt like this was like PTSD, where it's like, it is so burned in his brain having to learn that playbook.
Yeah.
And it felt like he needed to even show all these years later, like, I can still rep out these insane play calls.
All I can remember is Spiderweb Banana.
Yeah, the same. That's all I think that's all. That's the extent of the play call you could give me, and expect to get it regurgitated back. And it's funny. John Gruden came in this last year. We had the National Coaching Academy, where all of those coaching prospects come in, and he led a session that was largely about a lot of the play calling and all that, where they were out in the indoor facility, and he's making these coaches have to deliver these play calls.
Really?
And it was so great. And that's what it made me think of when I was watching Brad Johnson doing this of like how much this has gotten drilled, not just getting the words right, but the tone, the cadence, all of it. Like he was such a meticulous person, even on these National Coaching Academy.
I think
people.
We just talked about them talking about how Gruden was going to program him, right?
Yes.
So he programmed him, and it stuck.
It stuck 100% all these years later, and he did it at the premiere night too. Like it wasn't just a one-time thing in the recording of the doc. He repped it out at the premiere, no problem. But yeah, and I think I also thought it was interesting the way this is something I didn't really realize was the way that apparently Gruden didn't necessarily know how to use Allstott right away.
Yeah, I love this series, this segment, because they didn't pull any punches on this part. We all love Mike Allstott, and I'd be willing to bet that if Mike Allstott and John Gruden ran into each other right now, there'd be a big hug, right? But, with the adding and mixing in Keyshawn there and what he had to say, and I think Gruden was trying, in his interview, was trying to be conciliatory, but Mike was pretty stone-faced, and you could tell, that he wasn't happy.
Yeah, he wasn't thrilled at that point.
Because he felt like he had earned his place, and now he's being asked to earn it all over again.
Yeah, that's the tough thing when you have a new person come in that you never know what their philosophy is going to be and their play calling and what they like.
Yeah, if you watch this whole thing, there's various parts with Mike Allstott, and you can see him having trouble holding back his emotions a lot of time, and for good reason when you see the parts that we're talking about. But in this part, he was just like stone-faced.
Yeah.
There was no connection.
Yeah, I thought that was great. Also, I loved they talked about the Pound the Rock. When I first started working here, I got a tour of the lobby when I was like interviewing, and the Rock is there, and I got this whole that was one of my first Bucs history lessons I was given, was what this rock meant and the fact that it's still there. And I don't know how true or not this is, but the lore is that if you look at it, it's like you can even see where everybody would hit it, that it's a little which I don't know if I believe,
they weren't
but
actually
I like it.
Hitting it.
I mean, I don't know. That was this was the tour I was given, and I liked it. It was spicier.
They didn't actually hit it with hammers or anything. It was all figurative.
Yep.
But Rod Marinelli really did bring that in. He found that somewhere and brought it in, and then Gruden kind of adopted it as the whole Pound the Rock thing. And we really had a form-fitting case to take it with us, and we took it to Philly, and we took it to San Diego, and like players would touch the rock on their way out to the field. It was like the last thing they did before they went out to win the Super Bowl. So cool. And I feel so bad for the equipment people that had to lug that thing around. Not the lightest thing. It's not a pebble. True, but they did have a case. Yes, they at least had that. And then also Derek Brooks, this was sort of in the same part, but the fact that they could say, Derek Brooks was being interviewed and saying to Philly when we lost there in the regular season, and saying to them at the end of the game, we'll be back. Right. Yeah. And then they had the actual audio, and you could hear him say it. I thought that was really neat. That was really cool to find. So then, we get into the Super Bowl season. Man, Joe Juravicius, this storyline, I didn't know anything about this. Yeah. And when you talk about emotional parts of this documentary, I don't know Joe. I have no personal anything. And my heart broke for him and his family. And I just felt like, man, this is the stuff that makes sports what it is, of that it's about more than that. It was about the way that everybody was there for him and his family, the way he still showed up and played. And the 70-yard catch in the game, everyone talking about they've never seen him run that fast. It felt like it was out of a movie, this whole storyline. And I just, it was so moving. It really was. And you see a lot of people in this documentary saying, I can't imagine how he felt. And this one was a little bit of a tough segment for me here in this Docuseries, because I did know how he felt, because the year before it had a very, very similar situation with my wife and I. And so I remember talking to him at the time about it, and I don't know what I would have done. I can tell you that. Yeah. And whatever he would have done, everyone would have supported and understood, and it wouldn't have made anybody think any less of him. But man, I have to imagine it did impact the team, the season, the game, all of it. It felt almost like this, I don't know if I want to call it a turning point. It was a turning point. But 100% was a turning point. It felt like it just ignited something in this team of, if he is going to do this, we better back it up. The game had started poorly, which Gruden had told them the night before might happen, and you have to be able to respond. And so they had the long kickoff return to start the game, scored on the second offensive play of the game. And so we're behind. And then I'm telling you, that play turned the whole momentum around, and we dominated the game for the next 3 quarters until Philly made a little comeback at the end. And it turned on that play. Yeah, it's incredible. Of course, Rondé's interception.
I love it. I don't care how many times and how many ways we cover this. It's just delightful. Also, I feel like, there's that meme where it shows two arms sort of clasping, like the two flexing arms that are like grabbing each other, like we're on the same side. And I feel like I grew up a Cowboys fan, and I just love that no matter where I am, the hug is like hating the Eagles. It's just like, this is the shared Venn diagram of experiences.
Yeah.
And it's just, I love all the big moments from this franchise that are against the Eagles, and it's just delightful.
Yeah, and that, Trent would take moments like this to then dive a little bit deeper into some of our best players. You're going to see at some point they'll talk a little bit more about, Warren Sapp and Derek Brooks and Mike Evans, and this was an opportunity to talk more about Rondé. And I just love that how much Mike Tomlin, who was new to the job essentially in 2001, was pushing for. He was one of the first guys to realize how important Rondé was and how he could change that nickelback role and just revolutionize it, and Tomlin really was the one that pushed that, and right there we had yet another steakhouse stories. How many stories in this documentary of, if you're a Bucs fan,
just start going to steakhouses. You might run into you never know what's going to happen over there. Some meeting or Denny's, obviously.
And then at the very end of this episode, fittingly, they had John Gruden pick. I love the end. When the credits are rolling and they ask him who's the greatest Buck of all time. And I would not have guessed that John Gruden would pick Rondé Barber. I think it's a great pick.
I do too.
But
especially they talk about how he did it with the torn PCL. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I did not know that part.
No, people didn't know that at the
time. I was going to say, I'm like, I had not heard that even as on all the discussions of that play. I'd heard about like the way he tried to set it up and I made him try to think I was blitzing. I'd heard all that. I had no idea he had a torn PCL, which is just such a appropriate thing.
Ronnie didn't talk about his injuries.
Yeah, which, it's smart to not give the other team like an idea of like where to try to hit you.
Ronnie never missed a game.
It's crazy.
Due to injury, but that does not mean Ronnie
he wasn't injured. Yeah, that's very true. Okay, so now we get to, I loved this story. Doug Williams is coaching at Grambling. Culver House's son donates $250,000 to the program, and 4 months later, we win the Super Bowl, breaking the Doug Williams curse. Phenomenal. I'm not even I'm only a little stitious. I'm not typically the superstitious, but God, that's funny. I love it. Here for it.
It was, and that's yet another story that really isn't commonly known. And there was a lot of people who really believed that curse, right? And if you want to connect the dots there,
great.
That's cool.
So be it. Whatever works.
Worked out well for everybody.
Whatever
Doug
works.
got help at Grambling, and
which is great. And now, okay, this is another one of my favorite parts. Simeon Rice getting put in charge of bed check.
Yeah, that didn't make a lot of sense.
Phenomenal.
Counterintuitive, so to speak.
I almost feel like this is when I've heard, like, I think Nate Bargatze makes this joke about, like, you have like a, kid at home. And so you put like a 13-year-old in charge,
exactly,
like you leave them at home as the babysitter over your 9-year-old because clearly that's such a difference. I just thought that was hysterical.
So and we're moving on to episode 6 here now.
Yes. Yeah. We've transitioned in episode 6.
I would call the tearjerker episode.
Oh, interesting.
I think there was at least 3 times I was holding back tears in this one, and we'll get to all of them. But this, to me, this was the one that was like,
really emotional.
They really hit some emotional moments here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This whole even like latter half of the documentary, I agree, I think was just so like full.
We'll talk about it. There's at least 3 situations that.
Yes. So also, the fact that there wasn't a bye between these games, that's why we were just talking about the whole Simeon Rice being put in charge. Like, that's crazy.
It's the last time it's happened.
It's crazy.
Yeah, there was no. Back then, it was kind of. For a while, for a decade or two, sometimes there would be a bye week in between and sometimes there wouldn't. And it just happened to be the last one where there wasn't, and then it became standard that there always was. So we really did fly back. Everybody's celebrating. We get here, it's a huge celebration, and then you get a little bit of sleep and you pack again, and you're back on the plane the next, like, noon the next day. It's pretty crazy. I
also loved the 9 defensive touchdown challenge.
And every time we score one,
and they're like, that, was it Warren who went up was like, that was 9. Like that. I love that he said that at the beginning of the season. And you can say that and it not mean a whole lot, or people forget or whatever. Like, oh, I challenge you to do this thing. But like, you could tell they never stopped thinking about it and how much it meant, again, the way that Gruden was able to challenge them in a way that made them care about answering the challenge.
It was such a specific number too. Yeah. Why do you say 9?
I think he even said, he's like, I don't even know where that came from.
But everybody, there's enough voices there that this isn't like they're kind of fudging the history. They're going back.
Yeah.
He really did say 9.
He really did. It really happened. And that is so funny. Why not 10? That's such a more even number. Like,
give me 10 touchdowns.
Where did this come from? 9. I love it. And it was so cool seeing the stadium open as they come back. with all the fans and everybody getting to celebrate.
One of the cool things about that was on the plane flight back, which was the next day because we stayed overnight after the Super Bowl. So it was a Monday. When we were flying in, the pilot tipped the airplane like that so that you could look down into the stadium through the windows. It was really cool.
That's so cool.
So we knew what we were getting.
You could see people coming. That's pretty great. Anything left about the Super Bowl before?
Well, I was at that practice when Gruden ran the offense for the he ran the Oakland offense because he knew it so well, and he went out there and he was the quarterback, third string quarterback at Dayton.
Yeah.
And now he's running an NFL offense in practice, and it really did fire people up.
That's cool.
It was fun. They were having fun, but it was like it was kind of, you see later John Lynch going, "We knew everything they were going to do."
Yeah.
And this was a perfect way to show that we knew everything they were going to do.
Yeah, I liked that. The talking about the preparation, I agree. So then we go to the season after the Super Bowl. Opening on the road against Philly is a wild scheduling move by the NFL. When you have won the Super Bowl, typically that's not how it goes.
I don't think he let it be known in this document. Gruden was probably the most pissed person in the building.
I can imagine.
Was really mad.
That's wild.
Yeah, and it was a chip on our shoulder kind of situation.
And it seemed like that worked in our favor, which is, I love it. And I loved how they talked about even Rocky was there and we still beat them. Like, that was so great. They were like, we're not going to cave to Rocky. We don't care. And then, the Indy game versus Tony Dungy.
I really wasn't all that thrilled about reliving that game.
I'm sure. It's rough.
It's the worst one ever.
That was one I knew about coming in here, and I was like, man, it's, again, sounds like a movie, just not the direction you want it to go for your team, of facing the old coach and this insane comeback and on prime time. It's just, it was a crazy story, but I give them credit that they relived it even when this wasn't just showing the highlights that they were.
Well, you kind of had to explain how that season went off the rails, because I think at some point in here, somebody says, maybe it's Rondé, that this team in 2003, when we started, so we had to go to, because they're opening a stadium, we had to go to Philly as the Super Bowl champs. And not only had we shut down the vet the previous postseason, but now they're opening regular season debut for this stadium, and we demolished them 17-0. I could watch the Joe Jurevicius tip the ball to himself touchdown play a million times.
Yeah.
One of my favorite highlights offensively in this team's history. But you had to know how was this team that was so good to start the season and thought they were better than they were the year before. And I can tell you, Rondé told that to a couple of us after that first Philly game. He's like, we're better than we were last year. That's the way they felt about that team. And so how did it go wrong?
Yeah.
How did they finish up 7-9?
Yeah.
So we see some of that, and it's not just the Indy game, although that was a big deal. The Allstott Jurevicius getting injured on the same play, to me, symbolically wraps up that season.
Yeah.
That if you needed to show one highlight from what happened that season, that was it, because everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and both those guys get hurt on the exact same play.
Yeah.
And they're serious injuries, and Mike runs into Joe. I mean, that's all you need to know.
It's brutal. And then also it felt like the whole, they talked about the Keyshawn Gruden disagreements. Again, not glossing over anything.
Right.
I didn't know the part about basically the captains voting him off the island. That was quite a story.
I didn't realize it was the captains that did it.
Yeah, that's Survivor. I know you love that show.
I mean, I do. That just shows you, how deeply he had alienated everybody on the team.
Yeah, and to not get on the team playing it. So I feel like that's another sign of what happens after you win. It's tough to kind of keep the whole ship intact, as we can say. And so I thought that was, I knew there were some disagreements, but that was one storyline I definitely learned a lot about. And I thought that was, but that's what being a captain is, right? Yeah. It's holding people accountable. And I thought that was very interesting. And then same thing of the Rich McKay and Gruden part about disagreeing with how you build a roster, I thought was interesting, of the wanting to build through the draft and have all these young people versus wanting the vets that already know what they're doing. And I just think that's an interesting debate in general about roster building, is what is the right mixture of that. And that's why, again, your GM and your head coach got to be on the same page.
It's really hard to say, because that team won the Super Bowl in his first season, but you also can say the defense was already intact and it was veteran driven. Like, all these guys were very well entrenched already. And then the guys that Gruden brought in on offense, your Keenan McCardell, Joe Jurevicius, a couple offensive linemen, Ken Dilger, Ricky Dudley, these were all veteran players, and it worked.
Yep.
So I think you can kind of understand how he tried to replicate that several more times during his tenure, and sometimes it worked a little and sometimes it didn't work at all, but it never got us back to the promised land.
Yep, that's very true. So then we kind of go through the next few years, a few things that I thought were really interesting. What I loved about this documentary was when you watch it all, especially the way I did, where you binge it so quickly, how much you start seeing these through lines at different points in the history, and the way you see certain things in the history impacting decisions that get made now. I thought the way they talked about, especially Joel Glazer was mentioning when Sapp and Lynch are leaving and then later Brooks is leaving, his quote about it really made you think twice about
I wrote it down too.
Replacing a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
To me, having been here for 11 seasons now, I, of course, immediately thought about Levante and Mike, of the way that this team has treated them. I thought this was the explainer for that, of because we saw how hard it was to replace them, we're not going to make the same mistake.
And Joel said so. Joel Glazer, he said, owners learned too. We were learning on the way, and that was the lesson we learned.
And I can see where for them, literally the first year they're here, you draft multiple Hall of Famers. It probably seemed like it wasn't going to be that hard to find more. Yeah. If that's how you start with a franchise, I can see where you wouldn't necessarily know how hard it is to find.
Right.
They don't grow on trees as much as it seemed like they did that first
year. Early on,
So yeah, I thought that was a very interesting point. And then, man, of course, as you talked about the emotional.
The Chris Sims part?
Yeah, that was that, and then Tony Dungy's son.
Yeah, those were two of them, yeah.
I mean, goodness, both of those things.
That memorial service was packed, and they did a good job of showing that. And I thought the part about Tony being the one comforting everybody, and that's the kind of, and he explained why, to be honest with you, and obviously he had his religious background and the way he felt about that type of situation and comforting others. But the fact that Malcolm Glazer needed so much comforting.
That hit me very hard because, again, I didn't get the pleasure of getting to meet Malcolm, but to me throughout the whole documentary, and especially once we get to the part where he's passed away, that was the sentiment, was everyone just talked about how warm and caring he was, and the way it described his relationship with Tony's son, having grown up around him and all the time they spent together. I found that to be so sweet and endearing that it would hit Malcolm that hard. What it reminded me of, unfortunately, was I went to Shaq Barrett's daughter's funeral. And I thought about the descriptors of this, of these people losing children, and then the way that their faith influenced it. And the same way it described Tony and how he was exactly how Shaq Barrett and his family handled it as well. And I just thought it spoke so highly of both of them and the way that they approached it. And just such an emotional time. And remembering how much football is family, that all these people being there for Tony, him, comforting them, of how much it all affected each other, was such a reminder of how close all these people are, the time they spend together. And then, God, the Chris Sims thing, I didn't know this story at all.
Oh, really?
Crazy. And I don't know if people understood how insane it actually, I think people knew he was hurt, but to know that he was, on the verge of death.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I can verify because somebody says it early on, what a great dude Chris Sims was and is. I can verify that. He's just one of the nicest guys I've ever met. And watching this, I found it hard to watch the parts after he suffered the injury that we later found out how serious it was, but stayed in the game, and he explained why he did so. And then to see footage of him taking other hits, I don't know, I was like cringing. It made
everything about me hurt. Even though I know he's okay now, it was brutal to watch.
Yeah, and then for him to say he lost
9
pints. Well, it was in him. It was just not where it was supposed to be.
He didn't lose it. It just moved around where it was supposed to be. 9, and you're only supposed to have 15, 14. Ugh.
And then his wife coming in so that he could say bye just in case.
And to see how much that still was hitting him now, to remember that moment, brutal. I thought that was, to me, one of the most interesting parts of the whole thing, because I do think sometimes, especially now thanks to things like fantasy football and all of it, it's so easy, and they wear helmets. You forget the humanity of sports, and that as fans, sometimes you just care about if they scored enough fantasy points or touchdowns. But truly, there are life and death situations that happen. This is a person with a family who loved and cared about him and what he was willing to put on the line. And I thought it was such a great reminder of those moments that are so much bigger than football. Yeah, it was incredibly well done.
And it's another one of these moments where you see an NFL player and you realize how hard their job is and how brutal it can be. And you get these tough guy stories of guys playing through injuries and kind of feel like you watch that and go, well, don't. Don't be such a tough guy.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And then, we get Allstott retiring from his...
Another tearjerking issue.
Oh, God. I love Mike. Mike's the best. And just seeing how much it meant to him and the fact that at one point, I remember earlier in the episode, maybe he was asking a doctor if he was going to risk paralysis by playing, that was his only parameter for whether or not he was going to play. Shows, again, just the love of the game, the toughness, how much he cared. And just a guy that's been so great to have around Tampa and do so much in the community. And it was, at least I loved that he knew he was retiring. You could see that he got to have that moment of soaking it in with the fans and how much that meant. But yeah, all those things right in a row. This episode, I was like...
That's why I said it was the tearjerker episode.
Yeah,
I was like, I need a break after this
exhausted after that. Well, and that's perfect because now we will take a break, you and I, from reliving all of that. And now we, as we do every episode, I got a chance to talk to director Trent Cooper beforehand about some of the behind the scenes aspects of this and what it was like for him to make these episodes. And I definitely do talk with him about the emotional side of it and how you deal with that for sure. So let's take a listen to my interview with Trent Cooper. Well, Trent, thanks for being with us here again. Excited to dive into this one. And we are kind of getting to that middle section here, the meat.
Super Bowl,
the first one. And man, I loved these couple episodes. I thought it was incredible because this is where I had been wondering again of one of the most covered parts of Bucs history. What were we going to unearth? What were we going to learn and see about these eras? And for me, this also was the most emotional section, in my opinion, where you have Chris Sims. That story blew my mind. And you also, of course, are dealing with Tony Dungy's son's death. And I thought about, man, how wild for these episodes to be covering the highest of highs and the lowest of lows all right here. So tell me for you, what stood out about particularly trying to cover those two moments of knowing, I mean, man, these are emotionally packed. This isn't just rah-rah football. This is true life and death situations. This is people's lives. I have to imagine a very different situation than just, hey, let's cover, the boat parade.
Yeah, I think that you wanna remember that these are human beings and they're living their lives and they're going through things. And just because we love this team and we love these characters and we love these players and they catch touchdowns, they still have children and families and tragedy in their lives. And that's a huge part of the story. And also, if you're tracking like the rise and fall of the team, you're seeing this incredible rise in episode 5 of, did we finally put the pieces in place to get us over the hump? We were so close in episode 4 with the St. Louis Greatest Show on Turf.
Yep.
Bert Emanuel but we didn't get it done. And we were so close with Tony, and it killed us to walk away from Tony Dungy because we love him so much, but we kind of had to do it. Maybe I think we had to do it. But now we're on this ride, and it's going to be incredible. And then, but wait a minute, we're still human beings, and this thing that happens to Joe Jaravicius and his wife and their newborn son, that's real, and that's real life. And I'm so grateful to Joe and his wife for like letting us go there. And I think the three of us talked about it in different ways. And in the spirit of us telling that Joe Jaravicius story and what happened to their child is to honor their child and to make sure people never forget that kid.
Yeah.
That's Michael Jaravicius. And he was a huge part of our family, and he always will be.
Yeah.
And they trusted us to do him right, and I think we did. But then you get into, you got to get back to football.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're here to do, right?
Yeah.
So you get back to the football and you see some of those big games and those big moments, and you forgot that Tony came back as a Colt, and him and Peyton Manning stuck it to us that night.
I think a lot of people wish they could forget that moment.
but and it kind of broke our spirit.
Yeah.
And to hear Rondé talk a little bit about that, and then I personally didn't know what was going on with Mike Allstott underneath that story. So, man, you are in for some emotional stuff in those 2 episodes, and it's some of the peak football as well.
Yeah, it's so true. And we talked about this, that was your whole goal with this documentary was diving into the things and telling people the story in the way that they had not been told before. You didn't want it to be a repeat of what they just already knew. And I imagine this section was the one where you were probably I would imagine you'd be most concerned about that because of how covered it is. For you, what were the things you felt like you were able to unearth, or the aspects of it that you were most proud to find and tell in a way that had not been seen?
I think I'll never forget the moment when we kind of tapped into this treasure chest of archival footage. So, the WFLA had given Rondé Barber a camera to take with him to the NFC Championship and to the Super Bowl. And we're talking about behind the scenes, in the airplane.
And this is pre everyone having cell phone footage of things. Like you didn't get this kind of stuff. Yeah.
And it looks like Rondé Barber shot it. Like it's kind of a mess, but the intimacy of it is so cool. And I feel like I'm seeing, we always talk about that time period. Rick Stroud always calls it Camelot. This was Allstott and Brooks
Knights
and
of the Round
Sapp
Table,
and Lynch, and like these were our guys, but they were in their 20s, and you see this footage, and they're so young, and they're so like hungry to get over the hump. And you feel it, man, and it's so raw, and it's I love that archival footage so much. I could watch it for days.
Yeah, this is a perfect time to talk about the idea of how much footage you would have to access to make this. There's all those interviews, but then, man, the amount of footage you have to get. Where all did this footage come from? How did you go about trying to find all of how many people and resources did it take to get the kind of footage you need? It's
a lot. So it starts with NFL Films, who's our partner on this. So they love the franchise, and they open the vault and say, but there's a lot of stuff in that vault. So you have to know what you're asking for, or you just get in the weeds. Mm-hmm. So we have people that are constantly looking for, we're trying to tell this story in this moment. I've checked this I think there's a play here, and we're giving NFL Films lists daily. Can you send us this? So that's part of it. But that stuff you've kind of seen. Sometimes you get stuff you haven't seen, but like a lot of that you've seen. Then there's this whole other layer of things called, third-party archival. This is the stuff that, we have an archival team who they say, okay, well, if we get everything from WFLA and Fox 13, you've kind of seen that stuff too. What if we go to Miami and they did a story on Sapp, because Sapp was a Hurricane guy, or we were playing the Dolphins that week, and so all of a sudden we're seeing stuff we've never seen before.
That's cool.
And then what if we're playing the Raiders that week, and what stories were they telling? So we leave no stone unturned. We go to other places you're not expecting to try to find the archival, and then of course you're pounding social media and everywhere that you can, hey, did you ever take any home video? Did you ever? And, we were talking about Joe Jaravicius, and, she, I talked to his wife, and she's like, I could call Brad Johnson's wife. Oh, before you know it, like everybody's sending us
phone
stuff.
trees at work.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
That is really cool. So as you look at these personalities in particular, knowing that this was definitely an era of characters on this team, what did you learn about the dynamics of that, and that you didn't already know? That we all know, like, man, there were some big personalities on that team, but what did you learn about how they all meshed and maybe didn't mesh at times, and how they were able to still make it work with that? I
think it was super clear to me that Gruden was pushing all the buttons, and they were all very different. Very different buttons needed to be pushed to get the last 2 or 3% out of these guys. And that's what it was going to take to get them over the hump, right? So what was the button he pushed with Derek Brooks? He said, you need to win Defensive Player of the Year. And Derek's like, whoa. I don't care about awards. That's not who I am. I'm a team guy. I'm not a me guy. I'm a team guy. He goes, yeah, you need to be a me guy right now. I need you to be a me guy. He didn't say this, but I need you to go win Defensive Player of the Year, because it's going to elevate your play to a point where it's going to bring everybody else around you up a notch. And, oh, by the way, I need 9 touchdowns out of this defense. Whoa. We're the best defense in the world. Nobody's ever challenged us this way. Mm-hmm. And, we do a pretty good job on it. Yeah, I need you to do better. I need you to get 9 touchdowns, which is an absurd amount of touchdowns. but he demanded it of them, and it just jacked everybody up, and it put them on high alert. And I'll just say it, he kind of disrespected Allstott a little bit, and Allstott might have needed that because he'd already won 6 Pro Bowls, and he was already the greatest warrior in the history of our franchise. Maybe he needed a little 0.5% more, and you're going to disrespect Mike Allstott? Well, maybe that's what you had to do to get us over. And I kind of marveling at Gruden. He's literally pushing all these buttons. We always would hear about like Bill Parcells pushing all the buttons. And our guy was doing it too. And it was masterful.
What was it like for you interviewing some of these different personalities? What were they actually like to be interviewed, and what it was like for you to kind of sit there and witness that? I'm sure a lot of people out there are like, man, I want to know what it's like to interview John Gruden. I want to know what it's like to interview Warren Sapp. Like, for you, what was that? How did it compare to what you would have expected it as a fan and what you knew about them? I
think it's a little humbling because I love these guys. I love what they did for us, and so I got to take a second and just be all right. Okay, just take a second and get back to work.
Yeah.
Check the fan card at the door, get back to work. But I think the other thing is you feel a responsibility to get it right. And by getting it right, I just have to be prepared. Mm-hmm. So the prep that goes into it is insane. And like I don't really sleep the night before. I get up really early, like even up until the last minute. So for us to do one of those shoots, it's usually about a 4-hour setup. And in that 4 hours, I would say 3 of it, I'm sitting there at my computer, going through it again. But the key is not to memorize anything. The key, and I know you do it really well. I can tell. I can already tell you do this.
Appreciate that.
The key is know the material so well that you don't need the notes. And because once you get to that point, then you can be here. Mm-hmm. And you can be in that moment talking and listening. Because if you don't listen, you miss it.
Yep.
The universe is going to give you that thing. The interview, the universe, the film gods, whatever you want to call it, is going to give you that thing that you got to follow up on. And if you miss it because you didn't know your material.
Yep, you're too busy reading to be listening.
Or you're trying to sound smart or whatever. If you miss it, you don't get it back.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to miss any moments. I just wanted to be on my game, on point for all 100 interviews.
How long do you think you interviewed, let's say, how about we go with John Gruden and Warren Sapp? How long do you think either of those interviews were?
So John was about 5 hours. And then we went on a different day to the former fired coaches, what does he call his office? The FFCA.
Oh, yeah.
And that was such a treat. It's not in the film.
Yeah.
But I was in Bucs fan heaven that day. Like he walked us through. And it used to be the episode after he got fired, but we ended up pulling it out for a different reason. It's a killer, though. Like John Gruden in that film room, clicking through, and I had him go through the Rondé play and the Jaravicious play, and just watching him watch film and go through it, amazing. But that was John. Warren was only an hour, or maybe 45 minutes, and he's all over the film. We used every stitch of it.
That's great.
He's great. And he knows some of these guys, they don't even need me. Just like, seriously.
You could just be like, go.
Just go.
Just go.
Just go. I mean, maybe I'll just, guide a little bit, but, Sapp's the best. The best.
You talked about some of these little almost vignettes at the opening of some of the episodes.
Yeah.
Tell me how you decided some of these one-off stories to tell of, there's a employee you highlight, there's a fan you highlight. Some of these, how did you guys come across that, knowing how many of these little side stories there must be?
So in our business, they call it a cold open. Mm-hmm. And what's so cool about it is you can go off the res a little bit. You can do something a little bit out there, or the appearance of something a little bit out there. Mm-hmm. But you kind of bring it back. And right around the time that cold open ends and you see Raise the Flags, that title comes on, you should have a moment as an audience, you realize, oh, that's what this is about. So with our cold opens, we want there to be a little bit of mystery. Why am I seeing this? Where am I? What's going on? Wow.
Yeah.
And it pulls you in. So we care deeply about those. I want them to all be different. I don't want to play the same note twice. Get outside the box. I mean, we'll get to it in another episode. We talk about Jill Hobbs. It's my favorite one.
That's great.
Yeah. So, but the one in these two episodes, we're going to go to Denny's. We're going to go to Denny's with the Glazers and learn about the Bill Parcells interview. Like, that's a cold open.
Yeah, that's great.
And the moment they all three of them go, John Gruden, if we're going to do X, Y, and Z, we're going to go get the guy, John Gruden. And here comes the title card. It's killer.
Love it. All right. Well, Trent, thanks again for the time, and excited for these last couple episodes here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so as always, love hearing from Trent and all of his insight, and appreciate him. Yeah, I love stuff like this. And so just before we kind of move on to our final segment, any final thoughts on this episode for you?
Well, we were talking about the Gruden trade, and the first, it was the two first, 2 seconds, $8 million. I didn't realize until I watched this that they actually initially asked for Warren Sapp.
Yeah.
Al Davis asked for Warren Sapp to be thrown. I'm like,
yeah, of course.
I'm glad they drew the line right there. Right?
I would agree with that. Yeah, give all the money in the draft picks, but not that.
And then we talked a little about Simeon, but I just thought Simeon's presence in these in some of these episodes is just really funny to me, because he just pops in every now and then, and then just says some ridiculous but kind of on point and funny line. Yeah. Like, he said at some point he used the words fish grease. At some point, he used the word Shark Tank. I mean, you just don't know what you're going to get with Simeon. So.
I love it. And it's so perfect. I feel like they captured the essence very well. All right. Well, as we also do every episode, we wanted to highlight a little bit of what happened at the Raise the Flags premiere event several months ago back at Tampa Theater, for everybody who wasn't able to be there, trying to show a few of these little panels and what was, people, not everybody got to go to it. So we wanted to at least showcase now. And they are all up on the Buccaneers YouTube page in their entirety. So, of course, this episode we had a panel that was John Gruden and Brad Johnson. So of course that was the one that we wanted to highlight for this. So let's take a listen to Brad Johnson remembering when John Gruden joined the team.
And then I was actually watching the Raiders play, and I saw John go off on his quarterback named Rich Gannon. I said, God, I never want to play for that guy either. So here we are. So, but that was awesome. But the thing about it, when Tony got fired, we waited for 4 or 5 weeks. Like, who's the coach? There's all kinds of rumors. And as soon as, we hear 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and $8 million in cash, we think he's going to show up with a cape and he's going to play too. You know what I mean? So, but the first call I made was actually Rich Gannon. We played together in Minnesota, and Rich was ticked. He was losing his guy. I mean, they were buds. They had great success. They'd been the AFC Championship. Probably should have won that one if it wasn't the Tuck rule. But Rich was real with me. He said, Brad, you're never going to be coached by a coach like this in your life. He's going to program you offensively, defensively. He's going to have you game ready like you've never been ready before. And, you were with him from 7:30 to 5:30 a day. And thank you, Cindy, for letting us have him for that time. But it was a blessing for all of us. And can't thank John for being traded, to be honest with you.
I love doing the panel with the two of them.
I bet.
They were hilarious, and it was so cool listening to them reminisce. What stood out to you getting to listen to this?
I mean, Gruden came in and he inherited Brad Johnson, but Gruden loved Brad Johnson. Yeah. I can tell you that. And he loved him because he was the Bull. And that was Brad Johnson's nickname, the Bull. And he was so competitive and tough. And John loved that in Brad Johnson. And I mean, there's obvious affection between the two, but I just remember how much Gruden really liked Johnson.
Yeah. And you could see that for sure when they were talking. You could really feel. And at one point, Brad gets choked up, like really? Remembering just the whole time they had together and Super Bowl and all. Like again, as we talked about with the documentary, I just love seeing how raw the emotions still are for everybody of how important this was. So if you have not seen it, definitely go take a look at that on the Buccaneers YouTube and watch the panel in its entirety. A lot of great memories and funny stories. So that is going to do it for us on this episode of the Raise the Flags reaction show. Again, we have a few more coming up here, our final few episodes. So we'll come back for that as we dive into the next Super Bowl.